Jonah was 22 years old and had lived alone for almost 2. His mother's passing had left a silence in the small cabin that the wind off the Mojave Desert could not fill. It was a hollow quiet, one that settled in his bones and never quite left, even when he was hammering fence posts under the white-hot eye of the sun. His life was small, contained by the steep, dry slopes of Dust Valley. The town itself was little more than a single rutted street, a saloon he never entered, a general store, and a livery. It was a place where hope came to die, baked into the alkali flatlands. Jonah survived by mending the things that kept the valley's meager world together. He mended fences for the ranchers who ran thin cattle in the scrublands. He mended wagon wheels and axe handles. He was good with his hands. They were calloused and capable, stained by wood and rust. People used his hands, but they did not want the man attached to them. Jonah was the son of a white woman with defiant eyes and a black man he never knew. A man who had carried the brand of a slave until the war had supposedly wiped the slate clean. The war had not wiped anything clean in Dust Valley. It had only drawn new lines in the dust. Jonah lived squarely on the wrong side of that line. The ranchers paid him, sometimes in coin, often in feed for his mule or sacks of flour. They spoke to him with their eyes fixed on the horizon, their words clipped. Post is split on the North Ridge. Jonah. Wires down by the dry wash. They never used his last name, because his mother's name had been dirtied by her choice, and his father's name was unknown. He was a ghost in his own town. The men at the saloon ignored him. The women pulled their children closer when he passed, as if his mixed blood was a sickness that could be caught on the wind. He was tall but slight, built with a quiet stamina rather than brute strength. He had his mother's pale gray eyes and his father's tightly coiled black hair. This combination made people uneasy. He was a puzzle they did not want to solve. And so, he stayed quiet. His quietness was mistaken for slowness, for stupidity. It was neither. It was a shield. It was the armor he wore against the sidelong glances and the muttered words. At 22, he knew the shape of loneliness intimately. He knew the ache of a body that had come into its manhood with no outlet for its needs, no soft hand to touch, no gentle word to receive. He had watched the town girls, the daughters of the shopkeep and the blacksmith, but he watched them from a distance. The way a man might watch a flock of bright birds he knew would scatter if he moved a single inch closer. He was of marrying age, but the very idea was a bitter joke. No white woman would have him, and there were no black women in Dust Valley to ask. He was a man set apart, trapped in the amber of his own skin. His days were a rhythm of work, sun up to sundown. He would ride his mule, Gideon, out to the properties that bordered the desert, his tools rattling in the saddlebags. He would work for hours, the only sound the scrape of his shovel against the hardpan, the squeal of wire being tightened, the steady rhythm of his breathing. Then he would return to the empty cabin his mother had fought to keep, the cabin that sat just outside the town's invisible border. He would make his supper, beans and salt pork, or maybe just cornbread crumbled into milk if he had it. He would sit at the small table his mother had scrubbed until the wood was pale, and he would eat in the silence. The cabin was one room, with a rough planked floor, a stone hearth for cooking and warmth, a small cot in one corner, and his mother's old rocking chair, which he never sat in. It was clean, meticulously so. Keeping it clean was a way of honoring her. This day had been different. The morning broke with a sickly yellow light, the sun a dull coin behind a thickening haze. There was no breeze, just a heavy, oppressive stillness. The air smelled of burnt iron and distant sand. Jonah had seen it before. The Mojave was stirring. He had spent the morning reinforcing the small lean-to where Gideon stood, checking the latches on his shutters. By noon, the sky had turned a bruised, brownish purple. The wind came first as a whisper, a nervous rattle at the door. Then it came as a howl. The world outside his window dissolved. It was not rain. It was the desert itself rising up, a solid wall of grit and sand that clawed at the walls of the cabin. The sound was deafening, a high-pitched scream that seemed to come from the throat of the earth. Jonah lit his lantern, though it was only 2 in the afternoon. The light barely cut through the gloom of his own home. Sand found its way through every crack, settling as a fine powder on the table, on his blanket. He sat by the hearth, feeding small pieces of mesquite into the low fire. Listening, the storm would rage for hours, maybe a day. There was nothing to do but wait it out. Then, through the roar of the wind, he heard a sound that did not belong. It was a splintering crack, a heavy groan of wood, and the terrified scream of horses. He stood, his heart suddenly tight in his chest. He moved to the door, pressing his ear against the rough wood. Nothing but the wind. He must have imagined it. He was halfway back to his chair when a new sound came, a frantic, heavy pounding on the door. No one ever came to his cabin, ever, and certainly not in a storm like this. His first instinct was fear. It could be drunk ranchers from the saloon, meaning trouble. It could be someone lost, meaning danger. He pulled the heavy bar from the door, his hand resting on the smooth grip of the axe he kept by the hearth. He cracked the door open an inch. The wind tore it from his grasp, slamming it wide open against the interior wall. The lantern flame guttered wildly, casting frantic shadows. The storm poured in, a vortex of sand and cold air that blinded him. He raised his arm to shield his eyes, and through the brown chaos, he saw a shape. It was impossible. It was a person, or rather, the shape of a mountain that vaguely resembled a person, and it was wearing white. The figure stumbled forward, collapsing through the doorway and onto the cabin floor, bringing the storm in with it. Jonah fought the door closed, throwing his weight against it until he could slam the bar back into place. The cabin was filled with the howl of the wind that had entered, and the sudden, harsh sound of someone gasping for air. The lantern steadied. Jonah turned. A woman was on her knees, coughing, her hands braced on the floor. But woman felt like the wrong word. She was huge, taller than him even on her knees, with shoulders as broad as a barrel. She was dressed in what had once been a white wedding dress. Now, it was ripped, plastered with mud, and stained a filthy brown by the storm. A torn veil was tangled in her dark, wet hair, which was matted with sand. She looked up, and Jonah's breath caught. Her face was not soft. It was strong-boned, wide, with a square jaw and a mouth that looked unused to smiling. But her eyes were wide with a desperate, hunted panic. "Please," she gasped, her voice a low, rough thing, deeper than his own. "Shelter, just till it passes." Jonah stood frozen. He had never seen a woman like this. She was not just tall, she was built. Her arms, visible where the lace sleeves were torn, were thick with muscle, not fat. She looked like she could have felled the tree his cabin was made from. He realized he was staring. He looked away, his face burning with a shame he couldn't name. He just nodded, a single, jerky motion. The woman pushed herself up. It was not a graceful movement. It was a movement of pure strength. She rose to her full height, and Jonah had to crane his neck to look at her. He was a tall man, but she was a good head taller. She filled his small cabin, making the walls seem to close in. "My name is Bridget," she said, her voice still rough from the sand. She pushed the matted hair from her face, her hands large, with broken nails. Jonah just nodded again. He pointed to the bench by the hearth. "Sit, the fire's low." He turned away, busying himself with the woodpile, adding a few more sticks to the fire. He could feel her presence behind him, an enormous, unsettling weight in the small room. He heard the creak of the bench as she sat. He poured water from his bucket into the tin basin and dipped a rag in it. He turned and held it out to her. He did not look at her face, but at her hands. She hesitated, then took the rag. "Thank you," she whispered. He went to his stores, a small pantry sectioned off by a curtain. He brought out the pot of beans from last night, a heel of bread, and a tin mug. He dipped the mug into the water barrel. He set them on the small table. "It ain't much," he said. His own voice sounded strange to him, thin and reedy after hers. She washed the grit from her face and hands. The water in the basin turned to mud. When she looked up, he saw a deep bruise forming on her cheekbone, a raw scrape along her jaw. "The coach, it overturned," she said, as if explaining the bruises. "The driver, I think he hit his head. The horses broke free." She paused, looking at the meager meal. "He left me." Jonah stirred the beans in the pot over the fire. "The driver?" "No." Her voice was flat, dead. "The man I came here to marry." Jonah stopped stirring. He turned slowly. The wedding dress suddenly made a terrible, sharp sense. "I'm a mail-order bride," she said, staring into the fire. Not at him. "Or I was. My name is Bridget. I came from back east, from the shipyards. I paid my passage with 3 years' work." She spoke simply, stating facts as if she were reading them from a ledger. "He was waiting at the station in town. Mr. Abernathy. He had my picture. It was an old picture. Small." She touched her face, her fingers tracing the scrape. "When I stepped off the coach, he looked at me. He just looked." She fell silent. The wind screamed outside, mocking the quiet in the cabin. "He told the driver I wasn't the woman he'd sent for. He said there was a mistake." Her hands clenched in her lap, the muddy lace of the dress tearing under the pressure. "The driver argued, said he was paid to bring one bride, and I was her Mr. Abernathy. He just laughed. He said he'd ordered a wife, not an ox to pull his plow. He said I was a giantess, fit for a circus tent." Jonah felt a cold sickness in his stomach. He knew that kind of laughter. He'd heard it all his life. "He refused to take me," Bridget continued, her voice trembling now, not with sadness, but with a deep, cold rage. "He threw the coach driver an extra $5 and told him to take me back, or take me anywhere. He didn't care, just get me out of his sight. The driver, he was angry. He drove fast, too fast. He was cursing Mr. Abernathy, cursing me. Then the storm hit. He couldn't see the road. We hit a washout. The coach went over. I got out. The driver was pinned. I tried to lift the carriage, but I couldn't get the leverage. He was still. I don't know if he's dead. I just ran. I saw your light." She finally looked at him. Her eyes were not pleading. They were stripped bare. It was the look of an animal that had been cornered and beaten, and had nowhere left to run. Jonah looked at this giant woman, this rejected bride in her ruined dress. He saw the strength in her shoulders, but he also saw the deep, trembling hurt beneath. He recognized it. It was the same shape as his own. He turned back to the fire and ladled the beans onto a tin plate. He added the bread. He set the plate and the mug of water on the table in front of her. "Eat," he said. It was the only word he could think of. She looked at the food, then at him. She nodded once, a sharp, grateful dip of her chin. They ate in silence. The only sounds were the scrape of the spoon against the tin, the roar of the sandstorm, and the heavy, awkward breathing of two people unaccustomed to sharing a room. The air between them was thick with things unsaid. Jonah felt the smallness of his cabin more than ever. Her presence dominated the space, her knees knocking against the table leg, her broad back hunched as she ate. He felt a strange, vibrating tension in the air. It was not desire, it was awareness. He was acutely aware of her size, of her gender, of the raw humiliation she carried into his home. He kept his eyes down, focused on his own plate. He was terrified of looking at her, terrified of what she might see in his own eyes. Judgment, pity, or worse, the same look Mr. Abernathy had given her. When she finished, she placed the spoon neatly on the empty plate. Thank you, Jonah. That's your name? On the post outside?" He nodded. "Thank you, Jonah." The silence returned, heavier this time. The storm was not letting up. Darkness was complete now. Save for the lantern and the fire, it was clear she could not leave. It was clear he could not ask her to. The cot was in the corner, his cot, the only bed. He stood and cleared the plates, stacking them in the basin. His back was to her. He could feel her watching him. You can take the bed," he said, his voice quiet. "No, I can't. I'll sleep by the fire. I've slept on harder floors." "It's the only bed," he said, still not turning. "I'll take the floor. It's fine." He heard her stand. The floorboards creaked. "Mr. Jonah, I will not put you out of your own bed. I am large. I will break it." "It's sturdy," he said. "My mother, it was hers. It'll hold. You take it." He walked to the corner where his spare blankets were kept. Pulling out two, they were thin, worn, but clean. He laid them on the floor near the hearth, a good 10 feet from the cot. He arranged them, making a show of it, patting them down. He did not look at her. The necessary is out back, by the wood pile," he mumbled, his face hot. "But in this storm, there's a bucket by the door." "Thank you," she said again, her voice low. He blew out the lantern, plunging the room into near darkness, lit only by the dull red glow of the embers in the hearth. He lay down on his makeshift bed, pulling one blanket over him. He faced the fire, his back to the room. He heard her move, the shifting of her weight, the rustle of the ruined dress. The cot groaned deeply as she sat, then groaned again as she laid herself down. Then there was only silence. But Jonah could not sleep. The floor was hard and cold. The wind was a living thing, searching for a way into the cabin. But mostly, he was awake because there was a woman in his bed. A woman. He lay rigid, every nerve ending awake. He heard her shift, the ropes of the cot straining. He wondered what she was thinking. He wondered if she was afraid of him. A strange, bitter laugh threatened to rise in his throat. Him, the man the town treated like a stray dog, afraid of him. He must have drifted, a light, uneasy doze, because he woke with a start. The fire had burned down to almost nothing, just a faint pulse of red. The storm had quieted, settling into a steady, mournful moan. He thought that was what woke him, but then he heard it. A sound so quiet he almost missed it, a hitching, ragged breath. He rolled onto his side, very slowly. Bridget was not in the cot. She was sitting on the bench by the hearth, which he had thought was his domain for the night. She was facing the dying fire. Her back was to him, but he could see her outline in the faint glow. She was still in the wedding dress. Her head was bowed, her hands clenched in her lap. Her shoulders, those broad, strong shoulders that looked like they could carry the weight of the world, were shaking. She was crying. It was not a loud, wailing grief. It was a silent, terrible weeping. The kind of crying a person does when they think no one in the world is watching, when they believe they are utterly and completely alone. Her whole massive frame trembled with the force of her suppressed sobs. Jonah lay still. He did not breathe. He watched the shadow of this broken woman weep by his fire. He had spent his entire life feeling like an outcast. He was the half-breed, the mulatto, the boy who was neither black nor white, welcome nowhere. He was the quiet, lonely fence mender. And here, in his cabin, was a woman rejected for being too large, a woman called an ox and a giantess, a woman left for dead in a storm, still wearing the dress of a hope that had been murdered in broad daylight. He felt a sudden, profound shift in the air. The awkwardness, the tension, it all just evaporated. It was replaced by something else, a quiet, heavy understanding. He did not move. He did not speak. He offered her no comfort, no words. He knew instinctively that to speak would be to shame her, to make her aware of her witness. He just lay there, on the cold floor, and watched her cry. He gave her the decency of his silence. For the first time in his life, Jonah was not the only person in the room who had been thrown away by the world, and for the first time in hers, Bridget was weeping in the presence of another human being who did not judge her, did not mock her, and did not ask her to be anything other than what she was. They were two lost souls, hidden by the night, sheltered by the same small walls, listening to the same wind, and for a few hours, that was enough. The morning broke cold and sharp. The storm had scoured the sky, leaving it a pale, unforgiving blue. The world outside Jonah's cabin was remade, the familiar lines of the valley blurred by drifts of sand and debris. Jonah woke first, stiff from the floor. He had lain awake for hours, listening to the wind die and the woman's breathing deepen into sleep. The fire was dead ash. The cold in the room was a physical presence. He looked over at the cot. Bridget was asleep, turned on her side. In the gray light, she looked younger. The tension had left her face, leaving her features smoothed, almost soft. She had thrown one arm over the edge of the cot, a thick, powerful arm that was in sleep. Simply an arm. Her breathing was deep and even. She had cried herself to exhaustion. He rose quietly, wincing as his joints popped. He moved to the hearth, his motions practiced and silent. He rebuilt the fire, shaving tinder from a dry stick, striking his flint. The small flame caught, and he fed it, crouching, watching it grow. The sound of the cot groaning made him turn. Bridget was sitting up. Her hair was a wild tangle, her face swollen from crying. The moment she saw him, her eyes, she was instantly awake. The vulnerability of sleep replaced by a guarded, tense watchfulness. The ruined wedding dress was hopelessly crumpled, stained with mud and tears. "Morning," Jonah said. His voice was a low rasp. "Morning," she replied. Her voice was deeper. The awkwardness of the previous night returned, heavier now in the stark light of day. He was a man. She was a woman. They were alone, and she was trapped. He turned back to the fire. I'll check on my mule. The lean-to might have taken damage. I need to..." She looked down at her dress, a movement of profound shame. Jonah nodded, not looking at her. He went to a small wooden chest at the foot of his mother's rocking chair. He opened it. The smell of dried lavender and old cotton rose from it. He pulled out a pair of men's canvas trousers and a dark blue flannel shirt. They had been his mother's work clothes, but she had been a tall woman, broader than most. He set them on the bench, his back to the cot. "These were my mother's. They're clean. Might be better than that." He grabbed his hat and coat and left the cabin, stepping out into the cold, clean air, leaving her to her privacy. The damage was not as bad as he'd feared. The wind had torn half the shingles from the lean-to's roof, and a support beam had split. Gideon, his mule, brayed nervously inside, hungry. Jonah calmed the animal, gave him feed and fresh water from the barrel, his movements slow and deliberate. He was measuring the split beam when the cabin door opened. Bridget stepped out. The canvas trousers were tight on her, ending several inches above her ankles. The flannel shirt strained across her broad back and shoulders. The sleeves pulled short, showing her thick wrists. She had tried to tie her dark hair back with a piece of string. She looked rough, she looked practical, and she looked more real than she had in the tattered lace. She walked toward him, her stride long and heavy. She did not look at the ground. She looked at the damaged roof. "You've got a split beam," she said. It was not a question. "I see it," Jonah said. He was holding his saw, preparing to cut a new piece of timber. "That's a two-man job, holding it steady while you brace it." Jonah looked at the timber he'd selected. It was thick, heavy. He had planned to use a leverage system of ropes, a long, frustrating process. Bridget walked past him, to the wood pile. She selected a length of timber, hefted it to test the weight, and then, bracing it against her hip, carried it over. It was a piece he would have struggled to drag. "This one's solid," she said, dropping it on the ground. She looked at him. "Where do you want to start?" Jonah just stared for a moment. Then he nodded. "Need to clear the old one first." For the next 3 hours, they worked. It was a strange, silent dance. He had never worked with anyone, let alone a woman. He had certainly never worked with anyone as strong. He climbed onto the roof to knock the split beam free, and she stood below, catching the heavy piece as it fell, steadying it so it wouldn't crash onto the mule. When it came time to set the new beam, he prepared to climb up and haul it. She just looked at him. "You get on the roof," she said. "I'll lift. You guide." "It's too heavy, ma'am. I've lifted anchor chains heavier than this bit of wood. Jonah, get on the roof." He did as he was told. He braced himself, looking down. Bridget positioned herself beneath. She squatted, put her shoulder to the wood, and then she stood. It was not a sudden, jerking motion. It was a slow, controlled press of pure power. The beam rose into the air, steady as a rock. Jonah's mouth went dry. He reached down, grabbed the end, and guided it into the housing. "Got it?" she grunted, the muscles in her neck cording. "Got it," he whispered. She held it there, perfectly still, for the 10 minutes it took him to hammer the pegs and braces in. She did not tremble. She did not complain. She just stood, a living pillar, holding his roof up. When he was done, he climbed down. She was rubbing her shoulder, breathing a little hard. "Thank you," he said. "It's fixed," she replied, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. She decided to stay. It was an unspoken agreement. The coach driver had not returned. There was likely no coach to return in. The town of Dust Valley was a place she could not go. And she had no money, no connections, and nowhere on earth to be. Jonah did not ask her to leave. He also did not ask her to stay. She was just there. A new rhythm began. It was a quiet rhythm built on work. The cabin, which had always felt empty, now felt full, crowded, even. Her presence was enormous. But she pulled her weight, and more. She split firewood, her form with his axe so practiced it was clear she'd done it for years. She could stack a cord of wood faster than he could. She helped him feed the few chickens his mother had kept, her large hands surprisingly gentle as she scattered the grain. One afternoon, Jonah was preparing to haul feed sacks from his small pantry to the lean-to. He had 2 50-pound sacks of grain. He usually took them one at a time, slinging one over his shoulder, his knees complaining. He had just grabbed the first one when Bridget came in from the chicken coop. She saw him bracing himself. "You take that one," she said. Before he could protest, she bent, slipped her hands under the second 50-pound sack, and lifted it. She did not sling it. She picked it up in her arms, cradling it against her chest as if it were a large child, and carried it out to the lean-to. Jonah followed, his own sack feeling strangely light. He watched her set the bag down neatly in the corner. He had seen strong men in town, blacksmiths and ranchers, who would have made a show of such a lift. She just did it. He found himself watching her. He watched the way she moved, with a deliberate, powerful economy. There was no wasted motion. He watched her at night, sitting by the fire, mending the tears in his mother's old clothes, her large fingers clumsy with the small needle, but her brow furrowed in fierce concentration. They began to talk, not about feelings, but about facts. They were eating supper 4 days after the storm, beans and cornbread. The silence had become comfortable, no longer a void but a shared space. She was looking at her hands, spread on the table. They were scarred, the knuckles swollen. "My father hated these hands," she said, her voice quiet. "He was a docker back in Baltimore. drank most of his pay. He wanted, a dainty daughter, a girl he could marry off to some shopkeep. Jonah stopped eating, listening. "I was taller than him by the time I was 14, she said, a bitter set to her mouth. "And I was stronger than my brothers a year after that. He didn't like it. He'd say I wasn't a normal girl. He'd hit me, said he was trying to beat the man out of me." She traced a white scar on her forearm. "It didn't work. It just made me harder. When I was 16, I went to the shipyards. I lied, said I was a boy. They put me to work hauling timber, coiling rope. I did it for a year before they found me out. But the foreman, he didn't care. I did the work of 3 men, and he only had to pay me half as much as one. So I stayed. I worked on those docks for 8 years. 8 years of men whispering, calling me names." She looked into the fire. "They called me Big Bridge. They called me the Ox Woman. The women were worse. They'd cross the street. They said I was a monster, an unnatural thing. They said God had made a mistake with me." She finally looked at Jonah. "I saved every penny. I saw the advertisement in the paper, wives wanted in the West. It said a man, Mr. Abernathy, wanted a strong, capable woman to build a life with. I thought strong was what he wanted. I thought maybe out here, strong was good. I thought capable meant my hands." She clenched her fists on the table. "But he wanted a woman, and I'm just a monster." Jonah was quiet for a long time. He looked at her hands, then at his own, which were stained and calloused, but slender. He looked over at his mother's empty rocking chair. "My mother," he said, his voice so low she had to lean in. "Her name was Abigail. She wasn't from here. She came from the East, too. After her family died, she bought this piece of land. No one wanted it, too dry." He paused, gathering the words. He never spoke of this to anyone. "She was alone for a long time. The town, they left her be. A strange woman, living alone, but they let her be. Then my father came. He was a freedman, coming from the South, just passing through, looking for work. He was a good man. He knew horses. He knew how to build." Jonah stared at his hands. "My mother hired him to fix the roof, to build the lean-to. He was a black man." Bridget's eyes widened slightly, but she said nothing. "He stayed. He never left. They lived here, together. The town, they didn't like it. They didn't like the mix. The preacher came, the sheriff. They told her to send him away. They called her names I won't say. They called him names I won't say. She told them to go to hell. She loved him, and he loved her." He took a shaky breath. "I was born, and the town, they acted like I was a disease, like we were all a disease. No one would sell her supplies. No one would speak to her. When my father went to town, they'd spit on him, trip him. One night, I was maybe 4. A group of men rode out from the saloon. They were drunk. They dragged him out of the cabin. My mother, she fought. They broke her arm. They dragged him to the big cottonwood down by the dry wash. The cabin was deathly quiet. Only the fire crackled. They lynched him," Jonah whispered. She took me and we hid in the root cellar. We heard it. In the morning, he was still there. No one would help cut him down. She did it herself. With one good arm, she buried him, right out back." He pointed a thumb toward the back wall. "The town, they said it was justice. They said she'd defiled the valley. After that, she got quiet, like me. She kept working. She raised me. But something inside her was broken. The thing they hung from that tree. She got a cough. It settled in her chest. 2 winters ago. It took her. She died right in that cot you're sleeping in." He looked up at Bridget. His gray eyes were raw. "The town says she died of lung fever, but she didn't. She died of that rope. It It just took 20 years to choke her. They call me the half-breed, he said, his voice flat. The ghost of Dust Valley. So, no, you're not a monster. Bridget, you're just strong. The confession hung in the air between them. It was a bridge built of their deepest wounds. They sat in silence for another hour, the unspoken understanding solidifying. They were the outcasts, the mistakes, the things the world tried to throw away. The next few days were different. The work continued, but the silence was lighter. He found himself, when he was mending a fence, thinking of her. He found himself rushing back to the cabin, just to feel the warmth of her presence. One evening, the sun was setting. It had been a hot, dry day. The sky was on fire, bleeding red and orange across the desert. Jonah had told Bridget she could use the tin bathing tub. It was a rare luxury. He'd hauled and heated the water for her, filling the small tub near the hearth. He'd given her a piece of lye soap. He'd taken his work outside, mending a torn curtain on the porch, giving her the cabin. He sat there, pushing the needle through the coarse fabric, listening to the faint sounds of her splashing. It was a deeply intimate sound, one that made his hands tremble and his face flush. He kept his mind on the stitches. He finished as the last sliver of sun dipped behind the mountains, plunging the valley into a deep, purple twilight. The air grew cold fast. He stood, folding the curtain, and pushed the cabin door open. He stopped, frozen. She was standing by the fire, not in her work clothes. She had finished her bath. She was wearing a simple, worn cotton nightgown. It must have been his mother's, from the bottom of the chest. It was pale yellow, thin from 100 washings. On his mother, it would have been loose. On Bridget, it clung. It stretched tight across her broad shoulders and the full curve of her breasts. It fell to her knees, revealing her strong, bare calves. Her skin was scrubbed clean, glowing pink from the heat of the water and the fire. Her dark hair was wet, hanging in damp ringlets around her face and down her back. She was not the muddy, ruined bride. She was not the grim, powerful laborer. She was a woman, standing by his fire. The sight of her, so clean and soft and massive, hit him in the chest like a physical blow. He had never seen anything so terrifying or so beautiful. He must have made a sound, because she turned. Her eyes met his. The firelight played on the damp skin of her throat. He could not breathe. He could not move. He just stared. He saw the way the light defined her shape, the curve of her hip, the sheer, solid strength of her. She saw him looking. A dark flush crept up her neck. She did not cover herself. She just watched him, her expression unreadable. He looked away, his heart hammering like a trapped bird. He fumbled with the curtain, dropping it. He bent to pick it up, his movements jerky, desperate to break the spell. "Jonah?" Her voice was quiet, softer than he had ever heard it. He stood, but he could not look at her. He stared at the curtain in his hands. "Do I scare you?" she asked. It was a genuine question. He could hear the tremor in it. She had seen him flinch, seen him look away, and she had assumed the old, familiar reaction: disgust, fear. He shook his head, a quick, jerky motion. "Then what is it?" she whispered, taking a half-step toward him. "Why can't you look at me?" He swallowed, his throat dry. He forced himself to lift his head. He looked at her. He looked at her face, her eyes, her damp hair, the column of her throat. "No," he said, his voice thick, strange to his own ears. "You don't scare me." "Then what?" He struggled for the word. He was a simple man, a quiet man. He did not have the language for the sudden, violent rush of feeling in his chest. It was a dizzying, hollow ache. It was awe. It was longing. It was a feeling so new and powerful. It felt like being sick. "You make me," he said, his voice cracking. He looked at his own empty, shaking hands. "You make me strange. I feel strange." The tension in the room was a living thing. It was the space between the thunder and the crack. Bridget looked at him, truly looked at him. She saw the panic in his gray eyes, but she also saw the truth. It was not revulsion, it was not scorn, it was wonder, a terrified, raw wonder. A small, slow smile touched her mouth. It was the first time he had ever seen her smile. It changed her face, softened the hard lines. She took a step toward him. He stayed rooted to the spot. She stopped, standing so close he could feel the heat radiating from her skin, smell the clean, soapy scent of her. She was so tall. She loomed over him, but it was not threatening. It was encompassing. He was trembling. She reached out, her large, scarred hand moving through the twilight air. He thought she might touch his face, and he flinched. She stopped, her hand hovering. Then, gently, she took the hand that was crushing the curtain. His hand was swallowed by hers. Her skin was warm, slightly rough and incredibly strong. She did not grab him. She just held his hand. She laced her fingers through his. Jonah's breath left him in a rush. He stared at their joined hands, his slender, dark-skinned fingers lost inside her pale, powerful grip. She squeezed, just once, a gentle pressure. They stood like that for a long time, in the dying light of the fire, as the twilight faded to black outside the windows. Neither of them spoke. They just stood, holding hands, two outcasts in a one-room cabin, anchored together. The stillness they had built was a fragile thing, like a skim of ice on the creek, and the outside world was a heavy stone. It only needed one man to toss it. He was a trapper, a man named Silas Croft, who walked the high ridges checking his lines. He was running low on water, his canteen dry for half a day. When he saw the thin curl of smoke from Jonah's chimney, he saw the cabin as an easy mark. The half-breed kid. He'd take what he wanted. He came down the draw, his rifle balanced on his shoulder. He was expecting the quiet boy. He was not expecting the woman. She was splitting wood. Jonah sharpening a shovel head nearby. Silas stopped, his mouth falling open. He had seen bears that stood smaller. She was swinging the axe with an easy, powerful rhythm, the muscles in her back and shoulders bunching under the flannel shirt. She looked up, sensing him. She did not look afraid. She just looked big. Silas, unnerved, mumbled about water. Jonah, wary, pointed to the barrel. The trapper drank, his eyes never leaving Bridget. He looked from her to Jonah, then back to her. A slow, ugly grin spread across his chapped face. He understood. He saw the cot through the open door, the single room. "Well now," Silas drawled, wiping his mouth. "You keepin' circus folk, boy?" Jonah tensed, his grip tightening on the shovel. Bridget just turned, picked up a newly split log, and tossed it onto the pile. The sound was a heavy, final thud. Silas's grin faltered. He nodded, his eyes narrowed, and he backed away. Much obliged for the water. He slipped back into the scrub, and the silence he left behind was worse than his words. He was in Dust Valley by sundown. The saloon was half full, the air thick with smoke and the smell of sour whiskey. Silas bought a drink with a beaver pelt and told his story. He told it loud. "You ain't gonna believe what that little breed ghost is keeping out at his mama's shack," he announced. The men at the bar, mostly ranchers and layabouts, turned. "A woman, but she ain't no woman I ever seen. She's a giant, taller than any man in here, and wider, too, swinging an axe like it was a hatchet." A man at a corner table, well-dressed but with a sour, pinched face, looked up. His name was Arthur Abernathy. "Saw her with my own two eyes," Silas continued, emboldened by the attention. "The freak show that fella Abernathy sent packin', that's the one. And she's shacked up with the breed, sleeping in his bed, I wager. The giant whore and the half-breed, what a pair." The saloon erupted in laughter. It was a cruel, braying sound. "Mister?" Abernathy's face went from pale to a deep, blotchy red. He had been the town's joke for 2 weeks. The mail-order bride who was an ox. His humiliation was now complete. His rejected property had not just stayed. She had lowered herself to the only person in the valley lower than her. She had shamed him by choosing the dirt. He slammed his glass on the table. That thing is a disgrace, and that boy needs to be taught a lesson." He stood, pulling on his coat. 3 other men, bored and drunk and always eager for trouble, stood with him. They liked the order of things. They liked knowing Jonah was at the bottom. This was disorderly. They rode out the next morning. It was not a lynch mob. Not yet. It was a warning. Jonah and Bridget were patching the wire on the chicken coop when the riders appeared on the ridge. 4 of them. Jonah's blood went cold. He recognized Abernathy. They rode up slowly, forming a half-circle, penning Jonah and Bridget against the coop. "Well, boy," Abernathy said, his voice slick with contempt. He spat on the ground near Jonah's feet. "You've got a taste for large portions, I see." Jonah said nothing. He stood very still, his fence tool in his hand. "Or maybe you just like my leftovers." Abernathy sneered. The other men chuckled. Bridget stepped forward, her face granite. "We ain't done nothing to you." "You've done plenty, you cow," one of the other men shouted. "You're a runaway wife, a whore, and you're sleeping with him." Abernathy focused on Jonah. "She's a problem. Jonah, she's an embarrassment. This town don't want her, and we damn sure don't want her with you. You send her packing. You get rid of her, or we'll come back and burn this sty down around you both." Jonah's hand was white on the tool. He could feel Bridget trembling with rage beside him. He looked at Abernathy, his gray eyes flat and dead. "Get off my land." The quietness of the command, the sheer unexpectedness of it, startled Abernathy. He blinked. "What did you say? You half-blood trash?" "I said," Jonah repeated, his voice still low, but carrying in the cold air. "Get off my land." Abernathy's face darkened. He raised his riding crop. Before he could move, Bridget took another step. She was taller than Abernathy, even with him on his horse. She was not holding a tool. She was just there, an unmovable, furious mountain. "He said," she growled, her voice a low rumble, "to get off his land." Abernathy looked at her, at the sheer size of her, the power coiled in her shoulders. He looked at Jonah, who had not flinched. The laughter died. This was not as fun as they'd thought. "This ain't over," Abernathy said, pulling his horse back. "You think on it, boy. You think on what happens to filth that don't know its place." They wheeled their horses and galloped away, leaving a cloud of dust and a vibrating, toxic silence. That night, the cabin was a trap. The walls felt thin as paper. Every sound from the darkness outside made them jump. They did not talk. They ate their supper in silence, the unspoken terror a third person at the table. Later, Jonah was cleaning his rifle, a thing he rarely used except for rabbits. He looked up. Bridget was by the cot, folding the canvas trousers he had given her. She was making a small, neat pile. "What are you doing?" he asked. "I'm leaving," she said, not looking at him. Her voice was flat. "He was right. I'm trouble. I've brought this on you." "No." "Yes, Jonah. I know these men. I know this look. I saw it back east. I saw it on my father's face. It's the look that comes before the fire, before the rope." She turned, her face haggard. "Your mother, your father. I can't be that for you. I can't be the reason they come back." "They'll come back anyway," Jonah said, his voice rough. "They hate me. They always have. This is just an excuse." "It's an excuse I gave them." She picked up the small bundle. "I'll be gone by morning. They'll see I'm gone. They'll leave you be." She moved toward the door. She was going to sleep in the lean-to, and then she would walk away, into the desert, into nothing. "Bridget, stop!" She paused, her hand on the latch. "Don't go." She shook her head, a tear tracing a path down her cheek. "I have to. It's the only good thing I can do." She opened the door. The cold night air rushed in. Jonah was across the room in 3 strides. He did not know what he was doing. He just knew he would not, be alone again. Not like this. He reached out and grabbed her hand, the one that wasn't holding the bundle. She froze. His grip was desperate. His slender fingers locked around hers. "Stay," he said. It was not a request. It was a plea. "Please don't leave me with them." She looked down at their joined hands. His dark skin against her pale. His trembling, desperate grip. In her entire life, men had pushed her, hit her, shoved her away, or recoiled from her. No one had ever held on. She looked at his face, his gray eyes burning with a terrified sincerity. Jonah, the ghost of Dust Valley, was choosing her. He was choosing this. She let the bundle of clothes fall to the floor. She used her free hand to close the door, shutting the night out. She did not let go of his hand. They stayed, but the peace was gone. They worked, but their eyes were always on the hills. They were a 2-person fortress, waiting for a siege, and the siege came, not with fire, but with whispers. They ran out of flour. It had been 3 weeks. They were stretching the cornmeal, but it was gone. "I'll go," Jonah said. "No," Bridget said. "Not alone. They'll corner you. I'll go." "They'll hurt you." "They'll hurt us," she said. "So we go together." It was a terrible idea, but it was the only one they had. They walked into Dust Valley at midday. Gideon, the mule, trotted behind them. The town went quiet. It was as if someone had thrown a blanket over the street. The blacksmith's hammer stopped. The women on the boardwalk froze, then grabbed their skirts and hurried inside. Mr. Abernathy was standing outside the saloon, watching. He smiled. They walked toward the general store. The silence was deafening. Then it started. A small voice. "It's the giant lady!" A group of boys, none older than 10, emerged from an alley. They had been waiting. They kept their distance, trailing them like coyotes. "Giant!" one yelled. "Giant and the breed!" another one shrieked, emboldened. Bridget's back was ramrod straight. She stared ahead. Jonah kept his hand on Gideon's harness, his knuckles white. They reached the store. Jonah tied the mule. "Wait here," he murmured. "No," she said, and followed him in. The storekeep, Mr. Henderson, looked up. His face soured. "What do you want, Jonah?" 20 pounds of flour, salt, and 2 tins of beans." "Price has gone up. For you. Just get it." As Henderson weighed the flour, the boys outside grew braver. They were at the window, pressing their faces, making monster expressions. Then the first rock hit the wooden boardwalk by Bridget's feet. She flinched. "Get those damn kids out of here. Henderson," Jonah said. "Ain't my kids. Ain't my business," Henderson said, tying the flour sack. Jonah paid, his hands shaking with fury. He took the sack. As they turned to leave, a clump of dried mud hit Bridget square in the back. She grunted. They stepped outside. The boys had scattered, but they were still there, hiding. "Go on, get!" Jonah yelled. A rock sailed out from behind the water trough. It was sharp. It struck Bridget on the arm, hard. She cried out, a short, sharp gasp of pain. "That's enough," Jonah said, his voice deadly. He threw the flour sack onto Gideon's back, grabbed Bridget's good arm. "We're going." They walked, fast, back down the street. The boys followed, throwing rocks and insults. The adults watched. No one said a word. Mr. Abernathy was still leaning against the saloon, smoking a cigarillo, a look of deep satisfaction on his face. They did not run, they walked, heads high, out of the town, the jeers of freak and giant whore and filthy breed following them until they were out of range. They did not speak the whole way back to the cabin. The sun was setting, painting the sky in angry reds. Jonah lit the lantern, the small flame chasing the shadows. Bridget sat heavily on the bench, her back to him, her head bowed. "Are you all right?" he asked. She didn't answer. He walked around in front of her. The sleeve of her flannel shirt was dark, torn. A steady trickle of blood ran down her forearm and dripped onto the floor. "My God," he whispered. He grabbed the water basin, the whiskey, the clean rags from his mother's chest. He knelt in front of her. "Let me see," he said, his voice gentle. She did not move. She was rigid, a statue of misery. "Bridget, please, let me—" Slowly, as if it cost her everything, she extended her arm. He gently pushed the torn, blood-soaked fabric up her bicep. The rock had been sharp. It had laid open a 3-inch gash, deep and ugly, bleeding freely. He saw the hard muscle beneath, now torn. His stomach turned. He poured whiskey onto a rag. "This will sting." He pressed the rag to the wound. She hissed, her whole body clenching, a sound of pure agony, but she did not pull away. He cleaned the wound, his touch as light as he could make it, his heart pounding with a mixture of rage and a tenderness that terrified him. He washed away the blood, revealing the true damage. He bandaged it tightly, wrapping the clean cotton around her powerful arm, his slender fingers working against her skin. He finished, tying the knot. He was still kneeling, his hands resting on her arm. He looked at the white bandage. "Bridget." She was staring at the floor, her shoulders shaking. A single tear hit the floorboards, then another. He looked up at her face. It was crumpled, undone. Her eyes were squeezed shut, and tears were pouring from them, streaming through the dust and grime from the street. She was not just crying, she was breaking. A sob tore out of her chest, a low, guttural sound that seemed to come from the center of the earth. She hunched over, wrapping her good arm around her stomach. It's not the rock," she choked out. The words ripped from her. "I've been hit harder. It ain't the pain." She looked at him, her eyes flooded, her face a mask of a lifetime of torment. "It's the look, the way they look at me, like I'm a piece of dirt, like I'm a thing." She was sobbing openly now, her defenses gone. "My whole life, my own father, he said God made a mistake. The men on the docks, they'd make bets on who would pay to touch the freak. Abernathy, he called me an ox." She clutched her bandaged arm, rocking. No one, Jonah, has ever looked at me and wanted me. No man has ever wanted to touch me." Her voice broke, falling to a raw, shredded whisper. "No one has ever wanted me to be a woman." Jonah's heart shattered. He saw it all. The years of scorn, the stones, the laughter. He was trembling. He was a boy who had never touched a woman. He was a man who had been called filth his whole life. He had no words. He had nothing. Except his hand. He lifted it, shaking. He saw it move, dark against the lantern light, as if it belonged to someone else. He raised it to her face. She flinched, her sobs catching in her throat, her eyes widening in fear. She expected a blow. He stopped, his hand hovering. Then, slowly, he pressed his palm to her wet cheek. She froze. Her skin was hot, damp. He could feel the tremor in her jaw. He did not pull away. He just held her face. "I do," he whispered. The words were so quiet, he barely heard them himself. She stared at him. Her breathing hitched. I want to, he said, his voice cracking. He looked at her mouth, then back to her eyes. His whole body was trembling. I want you, Bridget, but I don't know how. He looked down, ashamed. I don't know what to do. His confession, so pure, so raw, cut through her grief. He was not disgusted. He was not laughing. He was afraid. He was as virgin as she was. In his own way, he was an outcast, just like her, but he wanted her. A strange, watery sound bubbled in her chest. It was a laugh, half sob. The tears were still on her face, but the agony was gone, replaced by a fierce, sudden, protective tenderness. She took his hand from her cheek, lacing her fingers with his. She took his other hand. "Jonah," she whispered, her voice still rough. And then she pulled. He was kneeling, off balance. He stumbled forward. She didn't let him fall. She just pulled him, guiding him, up and onto her. He landed on her lap. He was a grown man, but he felt weightless. He was sitting sideways across her powerful thighs. She was so solid, so warm. He was enveloped. Her arms came around him, holding him securely. His face was buried in the curve of her neck and shoulder. He could smell the soap on her skin, the salt of her tears. He could feel the soft, full curve of her breast pressed against his ribs. He froze, his entire body rigid. He was paralyzed, overwhelmed. It was not fear, it was a deluge. It was the shock of being held, of being surrounded. It was a desperate, terrifying, agonizing want that lit every nerve in his body on fire. He was too shy to move, too aroused to think. He just was held. She felt his terror, his trembling. She felt the rigidness of his desire, and she smiled. It was a real smile. In the darkness of the cabin, a smile of power and tenderness and knowing. She shifted, settling him more comfortably, her hand coming up to stroke his hair, his tight, coiled hair. The gesture was so maternal, so comforting. It made him want to weep. "It's all right," she whispered, her voice a low vibration that rumbled through his chest. "You don't have to know how." She leaned in, her lips brushing the shell of his ear, her warm breath making him shudder. "I'll guide you, Jonah," she promised. "Tonate." Her voice dropped, thick with a new promise. "I'll satisfy you. I'll show you. I'll show you that you are so very worthy of being loved." His body was locked, caught in a paralysis that was half terror and half a white-hot, agonizing need. He was a man, grown. He was sitting on a woman's lap. He was surrounded by her, the heat of her, the clean soap and lye scent of her skin, the impossible, solid strength of her thighs beneath him. It was too much. He felt small, and for the first time in his life, he did not mind. She held him, her large hands stroking his hair, a steady, calming motion. She was not mocking him. She was not afraid of him. She was, as she had promised, guiding him. "Jonah!" she whispered. Her voice was a low rumble, a sound that seemed to come from her chest, and he felt the vibration of it run straight through his own. "It's all right. You're shaking." He tried, but his voice was gone. He cleared his throat, his face burning. He was buried in her neck, ashamed to look at her. I don't want to hurt you." It was a lie, or half a lie. He was afraid of hurting her, but he was more afraid of her seeing him, of her knowing how lost he was. A low, soft chuckle vibrated against his cheek. "You won't hurt me. Jonah, you couldn't." She said it as a fact, a simple truth. "I'm not the weak one here." She shifted, and he tensed, afraid she was pushing him off. But her arms only tightened, one hand moving from his hair to his back, rubbing slow circles. "Breathe," she commanded, but it was a gentle command. "There's no hurry. There's just us." He took a ragged breath. It smelled of her. "I want to look at you," she said, her voice soft but firm. Slowly, his muscles obeying a will that was not his own. He pulled his head back. He was still on her lap, held by her. The lantern was on the table, casting a low, golden light. It caught the dampness of her hair, the curve of her throat. Her face was open, clear. The bruises from the rocks were dark, but her eyes were soft, steady. She was looking at him as if he were a marvel. "You're beautiful," she whispered. The words struck him dumb. Him, the breed, the filth. "No," he mumbled, trying to look away. Her hand cupped his jaw, her thumb rough with calluses, holding him still. "Yes, you are. You have your mother's eyes, and a good man's heart, and you are here, and you want me." She said that last part with a kind of wonder, as if it were the greatest miracle of all. "I do," he breathed, the words finally coming, a raw confession. I want you so much I feel sick with it." Her smile was slow, and it lit her from within. "Good, that's a start." She leaned in. He thought she would kiss him. He closed his eyes, his heart hammering, but her lips just brushed his cheek. "The floor is cold, and that cot is small, but it's warmer than this bench." She made to stand, and he scrambled off her lap, clumsy, almost falling. He felt a fool. She stood. She was a column of pale yellow in the dim light, the thin nightgown doing nothing to hide the power of her frame. She was a giantess. She was a goddess. She was Bridget. She held out her hand. He looked at it, the large, scarred hand that had held his, that had fixed his roof, that had been cut by the town's hatred. He placed his own hand in it. She led him the few steps to the cot. It was his mother's cot, the place she had died. He hesitated. Bridget sensed it. We can stay by the fire, on the floor." "No," he said, his voice gaining a small measure of strength. She would have wanted this. She would have wanted me to be happy." He sat on the edge of the cot. The ropes creaked. It was small, built for one small, sick woman. Bridget stood before him, a mountain of uncertainty. He was sitting. She was standing. The power dynamic was all wrong. He looked up at her, and she looked down at him. And for a moment, the awkwardness was so thick it was a third person in the room. He did not know the steps. He did not know the dance. So he just did the only thing he could think of. He reached out, his hand trembling, and he laid it on her. Not on her face, not on her hand. He laid it flat against her stomach, on the warm, soft cotton of the nightgown. She gasped, a sharp intake of breath, as if he had struck her. Her eyes flew wide. He pulled his hand back. "I'm sorry, No," she said, her voice choked. "Don't stop, please. No one ever just touches me." She took his hand and placed it back. It's all right." He was still sitting. He looked at his dark hand, spread wide against the pale yellow cloth, feeling the warmth of her skin, the solidness of her. He let his other hand join it. He explored. He moved his hands from her stomach up, over the curve of her ribs. He felt her flinch, but he didn't stop. He touched her arms, her bandaged arm, his fingers tracing the cloth. He slid his hands up to her shoulders, those broad, powerful shoulders. He gripped them. "You're so strong," he whispered, in awe. "I'm just me," she breathed, her eyes closing. He stood up. Now they were face to face. She was still taller, but not by so much. He could see the pulse beating in her throat. "Bridget," he said, and then he kissed her. It was a disaster. It was clumsy, a collision of teeth and noses. He was too eager, too rough, driven by 22 years of starvation. She was too startled, too unused to a man's mouth seeking hers with hunger instead of a jeer. They broke apart. both breathing hard. He was mortified. "I'm sorry, I—" She cut him off. She put her hands on his face, her large thumbs on his cheekbones, and she kissed him. It was not a clumsy kiss. It was deep and slow and sure. It was a kiss of profound, staggering gratitude. She was not a virgin. He sensed that, the docks, her past. She knew the mechanics, but she had never been kissed. Not like this, not with a tenderness that bordered on worship. She tasted of salt, from her tears, and soap. He wrapped his arms around her, his hands splayed on her broad back. He felt her shudder and melt against him. He was lost. This was his guide. Gently, she broke the kiss, her forehead resting against his. Let's get these off," she murmured, her hands fumbling with the buttons of his work shirt. His fingers were useless, shaking too hard. He tore at the thin cotton of her nightgown. It was his mother's, but he didn't care. He needed to touch her. The fabric ripped. She didn't flinch. She just helped him. They were a mess of limbs, of clumsy hands and whispered apologies. He was confused, overwhelmed. His mind was blank, every thought replaced by the single, roaring command of his body. He was infatuated, utterly drunk on her. He saw her body in the firelight. It was not the body of the women in the saloon catalogs. It was more. Her breasts were full, her stomach soft, her hips wide. Her thighs and calves were solid muscle. She was pale, a landscape of scars and power. And she was his. He fell onto the cot, pulling her with him. The little bed screamed in protest, groaning under their combined weight. But it held. She was on top of him, shielding him. Am I too heavy?" she whispered, her voice thick with old fear. He answered by grabbing her hips, his fingers digging in and rolling her, reversing their positions. He was on top. He was smaller, lighter, but he was driven by a sudden, desperate need to claim. He looked down at her. Her hair was splayed on the pillow. Her eyes were wide, watching him. She was not a giant. She was just Bridget, and she was open to him. "I don't know what I'm doing," he confessed, his voice raw. "It doesn't matter," she said, her hand coming up to trace his lips. "Just be with me, Jonah. Just see me." He did. It was not graceful. It was awkward. It was fumbling. It was the desperate, frantic collision of two people who had been starved their entire lives. He was clumsy, and she was tight, and there was a moment of pain that made her cry out. He froze, terrified he had broken her. "Don't stop!" she wept, gripping his arms. "Please, Jonah, don't stop!" He moved again, and the pain gave way. It was replaced by a friction, a heat that built with a terrifying, agonizing speed. He was lost in the feel of her, the strength of her legs locking around him. He was a man dying of thirst, and she was the ocean. It was the first time for him. It was the first real time for her. The climax, the explosion, was not just physical. When it came, it ripped a scream from both of them. It was the sound of his loneliness shattering. It was the sound of her shame burning away. It was the sound of two broken, thrown-away things forging themselves into one. He collapsed on top of her, his lungs burning, his body slick with sweat. He was boneless, empty. He had never felt so full. He was heavy, but she did not push him off. She held him. Her arms, those powerful, strong arms, wrapped around his back, holding him to her. Her breathing was ragged under his ear. "Jonah," she whispered, her voice thick with tears. "Oh, Jonah." He said nothing. He just held on, his face buried in her hair. And for the first time since his mother had died, he felt safe. He felt accepted. He fell asleep, still inside her, still held by her. Bridget did not sleep. She lay awake for hours, listening to his deep, even breathing. She felt the weight of him, a gentle, welcome pressure on her chest. She had spent her entire life trying to be smaller. She had been taught to hunch her shoulders, to stoop, to make herself less. When she slept, she curled into a tight, defensive ball, bracing for the kick, the shove, the muttered curse that told her she was too much, too big, in the way. But now she lay on her back, her limbs spread, taking up all the space she wanted, and Jonah, this good, quiet, beautiful boy, was anchored to her. He had not recoiled, he had not laughed, he had not run. He had looked at her, all of her, and called her strong. He had touched her, all of her, and called her wanted. She looked at the ceiling of the dark cabin, and for the first time in her 28 years, she did not wish she was different. She did not wish she was small. She felt his hand tighten on her waist, even in sleep, pulling her closer. She closed her eyes and let herself be held. The morning came. She woke first, to the gray light and the unfamiliar feeling. The cot was impossibly small, a tangled nest of limbs and worn blankets. Jonah's arm was heavy across her waist, his leg thrown over hers. His face was in her hair. She lay perfectly still. This was the moment, the morning after, the moment the light came, and the man saw what he had done, what he had touched in the dark, the moment the disgust set in. She braced herself for it. He stirred, his breath warm on her neck. He mumbled something in his sleep and nuzzled closer, his grip tightening. He was not pushing her away, he was pulling her in. A single tear, one of quiet, aching relief, slid from her eye and into her hair. She was not a monster, she was his. He woke slowly. He opened his eyes and found her watching him. He froze. The realization of what they had done, where they were, hit him. His face flushed a dark red. "Morning," she whispered, her voice rough. "Morning," he mumbled into her shoulder. He did not pull away. He did not apologize. He just held her. They lay like that for a long time, listening to the cabin wake up, the wood creaking, the chickens clucking outside. I'll make the fire," he said finally. "I'll make the coffee," she replied. It was a small, domestic exchange. It was the most beautiful thing she had ever heard. The days that followed were a dream. It was a short, sharp, stolen piece of happiness. They did not have much. They had a small, one-room cabin, a handful of chickens, and a town full of hate, but they had each other. The work was the same. They mended fences, they split wood, but now it was different. He would be hammering a post, and she would bring him water, her hand lingering on his back. He would be reading by the fire, and she would sit on the floor, leaning her head against his knee. They talked, they told stories, they ate their meager meals, and their eyes met over the table. And every night they fell into the small, groaning cot. It was still clumsy, but it was less desperate. It was loving. He learned the map of her body. He learned she was ticklish just below her ribs. She learned he liked it when she scratched his scalp. They learned to fit together, her strength and his slenderness, a perfect, unlikely puzzle. For 3 weeks, they lived as man and wife. They were the happiest two outcasts in the territory. And, of course, it could not last. The hatred from the town was a living thing. It had been festering. Abernathy had lost face. His cronies, the men he played poker with, felt the insult to their order. The breed and the giant, living, laughing, loving. It was an offense. It happened on a cold, moonless night. They were asleep, tangled together in the cot, warm against the chill. The smell woke Jonah first. It was not wood smoke. It was acrid, oily, kerosene. And then he heard it, a low, crackling roar. "Bridget, wake up!" he yelled, shoving her. She woke instantly, confused. "What?" The world outside their window was bright orange.
Fire!
He leaped from the cot, naked, grabbing his trousers. The lean-to, the part of the cabin where Gideon was kept, was a wall of flame. The dry straw and hay had gone up like gunpowder. "Oh God, Gideon," he breathed. He pulled the cabin door open. The heat hit him like a fist. The entire side of their home was engulfed. "They did this," Bridget said, her voice a low, terrible growl. She was pulling on her own canvas trousers, her work shirt. A sound split the night, not the fire. Laughter, drunk, male laughter, and the sound of horses riding away, fast, back toward town.
"Abernathy's men,"
Jonah spat. The fire was moving faster than he could believe. The roof shingles were catching. Smoke poured into the cabin. "We have to get out. Grab the rifle. The money tin." Bridget grabbed the rifle from the wall. Jonah went for the small tin box he kept under a floorboard. Then the mule screamed. It was a sound of pure, equine terror. Gideon, he was trapped in the lean-to. "No," Jonah said. He ran back to the door.
"Jonah, don't! It's too late! It's coming down!"
"I can't let him burn." He ran out into the yard. The heat was scorching, blistering his skin. The lean-to door was blocked by a wall of fire. He could hear the mule kicking, screaming. "There's no way in," Bridget yelled. Right behind him. The smoke was so thick he could barely breathe. The main beam of the lean-to, the one they had fixed together, was glowing red. "The window!" Jonah yelled. There was a small opening on the side. He ran to it, coughing. He grabbed his axe from the woodpile. He smashed the frame. "Gideon, come on, boy!" The terrified animal was just a shadow in the smoke.
"It's going to go!"
Bridget screamed. The roof of the cabin was groaning, the sound of a dying beast. "We have to go! Jonah, now! The house!" He looked at the lean-to, at the flames. He looked at the cabin, their cabin. His mother's rocking chair was visible. Just inside the door, smoke curling around it.
"Bridget, get clear!"
he yelled, shoving her toward the open yard.
"Get clear!"
He turned to run after her. He never made it. With a sound like a cannon shot, the main roof beam of the cabin split. A section of the burning roof collapsed inward, and the front wall, the one Jonah was facing, exploded outward. A heavy, burning piece of timber, a main support post, struck him across the leg. He screamed, a high, thin sound, and went down. The breath was knocked from him. Searing, white-hot pain shot from his thigh to his ankle. He tried to move, but his leg was pinned, and it was on fire. "Jonah!" Her scream was not human. It was the roar of a she-bear. She ran into the falling debris. She did not hesitate. The flames licked at her, singing her hair, her shirt. She reached him, grabbed the burning beam, and with a guttural cry of pure, agonizing effort, she lifted it. She threw the timber, a 200-pound piece of burning oak, off him as if it were a log. His trousers were on fire. He was screaming, trying to beat the flames out. She fell on him, using her own body to smother the fire, her hands beating at his burning leg. "I've got you," she grunted, her voice thick with smoke and fury. "I've got you." She put her arms under his, hauled him to his feet. He cried out as his leg buckled. It was broken, badly. She didn't care. She slung his arm over her shoulder, wrapped her own arm around his waist, and she carried him. She hauled him, half walking, half dragging, away from the inferno, out past the woodpile, as the rest of the cabin collapsed in on itself with a final, deafening whoosh. They fell in a heap in the dirt, 50 yards away. They lay there, gasping, coughing, their lungs full of smoke. The cabin was gone. The lean-to was gone. Gideon's screams had stopped. Everything was gone. His mother's chair, the chest, the cot, their life. All of it was a pillar of fire, roaring into the black sky. Jonah looked at the ruins, his face pale, streaked with soot. He was in shock. Then he looked at his leg. The canvas was burned away. His skin beneath a raw, blistering, bloody mess. The bone. The angle was wrong. He started to shake, a deep, bone-rattling chill. It's all gone," he whispered. Bridget sat up. Her hair was half burned off on one side. Her face was red, blistered, but her eyes were not full of despair. They were full of a cold, hard fire that was brighter than the one devouring their home. She tore a long strip from the bottom of her own shirt. She knelt by his leg, her touch surprisingly gentle. "It's bad, Jonah," she said, her voice flat. "It's broken, and the burn is deep." She began to wrap the wound, tight, making a crude splint. He cried out, the pain a fresh wave of nausea. "I know," she said. "I know." When she was done, she sat back on her heels. They were in the dirt, illuminated by the dying flames of their entire world. They had nothing, not even shoes. "They'll come back," Jonah whispered, his teeth chattering. "In the morning. They'll come back to see—" "I know," Bridget said. "They'll kill us. They'll finish it." "No," she said. The word was final. "They won't—" She looked at him, her face hard in the firelight. "We can't stay here. We can't go to town. We can't go south. We're done here." "Where can we go?" he choked. I can't walk. Bridget." "I know." She looked north, toward the black, jagged line of the mountains that walled in the valley. "You're not going to walk." She pointed. "Up there, in the northern range. I heard talk on the docks, back east. From a man who'd come back broke. He said there are mining camps up there, men who were abandoned by the companies, men who got sick or were just different, outcasts. They have their own towns, no laws, no sheriffs, just people the world threw away." He looked at the mountains. They were a week's walk, for a healthy man. "Bridget, we'll die. I'll die." She leaned in, her face close to his. She put her strong, blistered hand on his cheek. "No, you won't," she said. "I fixed your roof. I cleaned your wounds. I slept in your bed, and I pulled you from that fire. I am not letting you die." She looked at the mountains. "It's our only chance, a place where we're just people." She stood, a towering silhouette against the flames. "I'll let you rest for 1 hour. Then we go, before the sun comes up, before they come back." He looked at her, this giant woman, this ox, this monster. She had lost everything, just like him, and she was not broken. She was magnificent. "How?" he whispered, his voice hoarse. "How will we get there?" Bridget looked down at him, her face softening for just a second. "You'll rest," she said, "and I'll carry you." The smoke was a gray smudge on the horizon behind them, and the sun was a cold, hateful eye in the east when they began. They had nothing. Bridget had salvaged the rifle. She had the money tin, a pitifully light thing, tucked in the waistband of her canvas trousers. And she had her father's axe, a heavy-headed tool she had kept with her things, saved from the flames by sheer, unthinking instinct. It was strapped to her back. Jonah had his life, and a leg that was a universe of throbbing, searing pain. He was barefoot. She had managed to grab one of his boots and her own, but his burned leg was too swollen, too raw, to fit inside. She had wrapped it in more strips of her shirt, but it was a poor, bloody bundle. She had found a stout tree branch, and Jonah had hacked at it with his knife, the one thing he'd had in his pocket, to make a crude crutch. "I can walk," he'd said, his voice tight, his face pale as ash. He couldn't. He tried. He put his arm over her shoulder, his other hand on the crutch, and he tried to hop. He made it 10 yards. The jolt of each movement sent waves of white-hot sickness through him. He stopped, hanging his head, his body slick with a cold sweat. I can't, he gasped, his shame as sharp as the pain. Bridget looked at him. She looked at the mountains, a jagged purple wall that seemed 100 miles away. She looked back at the valley, where the smoke was rising, where Abernathy and his men would soon be waking. Curious. She did not sigh. She did not complain. She just acted. "Give me the rifle," she said. He handed it to her. She slung it over one shoulder, the axe already on her back. She squatted in front of him, her back to him. "Come on." "What?" "Get on. Put your arms around my neck. Lock your hands." "Bridget, no, I won't. I'm a man grown. I'm 160 pounds. You can't." "I can carry a 200-pound beam out of a fire." "Jonah," she said, her voice flat, leaving no room for argument. "I can carry you. We're wasting light." He swallowed. The humiliation was a bitter, metallic taste in his mouth. He was useless, a burden, the thing she had to save, again and again. He did as he was told. He draped himself over her, his good leg dangling, his burned one held out stiffly. He locked his hands over her collarbone. She put her hands under his knees, and she stood. She stood. It was not easy. He heard the deep grunt that she could not suppress. He felt the muscles in her back and shoulders lock into solid plates of iron. But she was standing, and he was on her back, like a child. She began to walk. Her stride was not long, not like before. It was a heavy, plodding, deliberate march. Step, plant, step, plant. She moved with the steady, unstoppable rhythm of an ox, just as they had called her. But she was not an ox. She was a woman, and she was carrying her man away from the world that wanted to kill them. They moved north, leaving the valley floor, entering the broken, rocky foothills that led to the high range. The sun climbed. There was no shade. The ground was hardpan and sharp rock, covered in cholla and prickly pear. Bridget's boots, good thick-soled work boots, protected her, but the effort. Jonah could feel her. He could feel the sweat soaking her shirt, making his own chest damp. He could hear her breathing, a deep, rhythmic huh, 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 with every step. He kept his eyes closed. He could not bear to watch the ground pass by, to see his own helplessness. After what felt like a lifetime, she stopped. She did not put him down. She just stood, her head bowed, her whole body heaving. "I'm sorry," he whispered into her scorched hair. "I'm so sorry, Bridget." "Don't be sorry," she panted, her voice tight. "Just be light and be quiet. Let me work," she went on. She carried him for what must have been an hour, maybe 2. Then she found a slip of shade under a granite overhang, and she gently, carefully, lowered him to the ground. She collapsed beside him, her chest working like a bellows. He looked at her. Her face was bright red, dripping, but she was already pulling the small water skin she had also saved. A last-second grab. She drank, then handed it to him. "Just a sip," she said. He drank. The water was warm, but it was life. "My leg," he said. The pain was a living thing, a fire that had its own heartbeat. She unwrapped the crude bandage. The sight of it made his stomach heave. It was a mess of blistered, weeping skin. The cloth stuck to it. "We need clean water. We need things we don't have," she said. She tore another strip from her shirt, dipped it in the precious water, and began to clean it as best she could. He cried out, his hands clenching in the dirt. "I know," she said, her voice a low, steady rumble. "I know. Jonah, hold on to me." He gripped her arm, his nails digging into her strong flesh, as she cleaned the wound. "It's not just the burn," she said, her fingers probing, her touch surprisingly light. "The bone is broken. I can feel it. It's a clean break. I think, but it needs to be set. I can't do that here. We have to keep moving." She rewrapped it. We rest for 10 minutes, then we go again. No, he said. I can use the crutch. The ground it's flatter here. You'll slow us down, and you'll fall. I won't be carried like a sack. Bridget, I won't! His voice cracked with a shame so deep it hurt more than the leg. She looked at him, her eyes softening. She saw the man inside the broken body. She saw his pride, the last thing he had. She nodded. All right, we'll try. He got up, using the crutch. He put his arm around her, and they moved. It was a terrible, lurching, three-legged gait. It was slow. It was agony. Every time his good foot hit the ground, the jolt shot up his body and into his broken leg. He clenched his teeth until his jaw ached. They moved faster than she could carry him, but the cost was higher. He was draining himself, his face a mask of gray pain. They found a small, cold stream, a trickle coming down from the high peaks. They drank until their stomachs ached. Bridget refilled the water skin. She soaked rags and wrapped his leg in the cold, wet cloth. It was a small mercy, a moment of relief from the fire. They kept moving. They crossed dry, barren hills. They pushed through thickets of manzanita that tore at their clothes and skin. Jonah fell. He fell a dozen times. His crutch would slip on loose rock, or his good leg would just give out, and every time he fell, he would scream, a thin, animal sound, as his broken leg hit the ground. And every time, Bridget would be there. She would stop, her face a mask of iron will, and she would haul him to his feet. She would say nothing. She would just lift. Leave me, he begged, after a particularly bad fall, where he had landed hard. And he knew, he just knew, he could not get up again. He was weeping, the tears leaving clean tracks in the soot on his face. Just leave me. Take the rifle. Save yourself. Please. Bridget, let me die. She looked down at him. He was a broken thing in the dirt. She slapped him. It was not a hard slap, but it was sharp. It cracked across his face with a sound that shocked them both. His head snapped back. He stared at her, his tears frozen. She knelt in front of him, her face inches from his. Her eyes were burning. Listen to me, Jonah, she growled. They took my home. They took my dignity. They took my name. Then they came, and they took your home. They took your past. They took your mule. They burned everything we had. They are not taking you. She grabbed the front of his shirt, hauling him up to a sitting position. I did not pull you from a fire to let you die on a rock. You are mine. You hear me? You are my man, and I am your woman. And we are getting off this mountain. Now, you get up, or so help me. I will carry you again. I will strap you to my back like a dead deer. Your choice. He looked at her. He saw the fury, the blisters, the burned hair. He saw the unshakable, terrifying, beautiful strength that was so much more than muscle. He nodded, a single jerky motion. She helped him up, and they went on. They found a cave that night. It was not much, a hollow in the rock, barely deep enough to get out of the wind, but it was shelter. They had no fire. They did not dare. The light would be a beacon. They sat in the cold, black dark, huddled together for warmth. They had nothing to eat, save for a few dried berries Bridget had recognized and stuffed in her pocket. They were bitter, but they were something. The cold was a physical thing. It seeped into his bones. His leg was a solid, throbbing column of ice and fire. He was shaking, a deep, uncontrollable shivering. I'm so cold, he whispered, his teeth chattering. Bridget said nothing. She just shifted. She pulled him against her, his back to her chest. She wrapped her arms and legs around him, creating a cocoon of her own body. He was enveloped in her. She was a furnace. He was a small, cold bird, and she was his nest. He pushed his back against her softness, her warmth. This is better, Just sleep, she murmured, her chin resting on the top of his head. I can't. It hurts. I know. They sat in silence for a long time. The only sound was the wind, howling over the rocks. Sing, he whispered. What? Sing something. My mother, she used to sing when I was sick, when my father... He choked. Bridget was quiet. She was a woman of the docks. She knew sea shanties and barroom songs. She did not know lullabies. I don't know any soft songs. Jonah, sing anything, please. I need a voice. Not the wind. So she sang. Her voice was what he expected. Low, rough, a little flat. It was not pretty. She sang a song about a ship, the Mary Ann, and a storm off the Cape. It was a song of work, and loss, and water. But it was a human voice. It was her voice. He listened to the words, felt the vibration of her song in her chest, against his back, and the pain in his leg. It didn't go away, but it receded. It became a distant drum, instead of a roaring cannon. When she finished, the silence returned. But it was a different silence. Your mother, she said, her voice soft in the dark. She was a strong woman, to bury her own man, to raise you. She was, he whispered. She was so tired. At the end, she was just tired of fighting. I'm tired, too, Bridget admitted, her voice so quiet he almost missed it. He twisted in her grip, a painful, awkward movement, until he could see her face, a pale shape in the absolute dark. We'll rest, he said. When we get to this miner's town, we'll rest. Yes. He reached up, his hand cold, and he touched her face. He felt the curve of her cheek, the swell of her lip, the rough singed hair. You saved me, Bridget. I saved me, Jonah, she said. You're part of me. I can't lose a part of me. Not again. He was quiet. He understood. They were not two people. They were one thing. A thing that had been burned and beaten and was now crawling out of the ash. You called me your man, he said. I did. And you are my woman. He paused. The word felt small. It was not enough. You are my bride. She went utterly still. The word hung in the cold air. Bride, the word that had been a curse, the name she had been given, and that had been snatched away in humiliation. He said it, not as a joke, not as a contract, but as a fact, as a vow. She put her forehead against his. Yes, she whispered. I am... Now, sleep, my bridegroom. He slept. The next day was snow. They had climbed higher than they knew. They woke, stiff and frozen, to a world of white. The wind was bitter, driving needles of ice against their faces. Jonah's crutch was useless in the drifts. She carried him all day. She was a machine, a slow, relentless, powerful machine. Her legs, thick with muscle from the shipyards, from a life of heavy labor, found purchase in the snow. Her shoulders, broad as an axe handle, took the strain. Jonah was delirious. The pain, the cold, the lack of food. His mind was slipping. He would murmur, talking to his mother. He would call out, thinking he was in the fire. And Bridget would just say, I've got you, Jonah, I'm here. Hold on. She was flagging. He could feel it. Her steps were shorter. Her breathing was a ragged, tearing sound. She was fueled by nothing but a will of iron. They were in a high pass, the snow swirling, the visibility down to a few yards, when the shapes appeared. 4 of them, men, on horseback. They emerged from the white like ghosts, rifles held across their saddles. They were not miners. They were hard men, dressed in mismatched furs and leathers, their faces scarred by wind and cold, They fanned out, surrounding them. Bridget stopped, lowering Jonah to his feet in the snow. He leaned on her, barely able to stand, his leg a dead, frozen weight. "Well, well," the lead man said. He had a thick, black beard and one dead, white eye. "What have we got here?" His eyes raked over them. He saw a breed, crippled, and a giant of a woman, exhausted, but standing like a cornered wolf. "That's a big woman," another man cackled. "What you feed her, boy?" Just let us pass," Bridget said. Her voice was a low growl. "We want no trouble." "Oh, I reckon you don't," the leader said. He dismounted, walking toward them, his boots crunching. "But we want what you got, that rifle, that axe, and—" His dead eye roved over Bridget's form. "Maybe a little sport. It's been a cold winter." The other men laughed. Jonah tried to raise his head. Leave her alone." The leader just sneered. "You, or what? Breed. You'll hop at me?" He reached for the rifle on Bridget's shoulder. Bridget moved. She was not fast. She was slow. She just shifted her weight. She put herself between the man and Jonah. "Don't," she said. "Or what, cow?" He grabbed for her. He never saw the axe. It was off her back and in her hands in one fluid, powerful motion. She did not swing it. She just held it. The heavy, double-bitted head balanced, aimed at his throat. She did not scream. She did not yell. She just changed. The exhaustion fell away. The blisters, the burned hair, they were just details. What stood there was something primal. It was the woman who had lifted a burning beam. It was the woman who had carried a grown man for 2 days. Her eyes were not human. They were flat, cold, and promised nothing but a violent, bloody death. "You touch him," she whispered, her voice so low the wind almost took it. "And I will split your head from your jaw. You touch me, and I'll take my time." The man froze. His hand was halfway to her. He was a killer. He had seen death. He was looking at it. This was not a woman. This was a force. His men had their rifles up. "Kill her, boss!" one yelled. The leader looked at the axe. It was 2 feet from his throat. He looked at her eyes. She was not bluffing. He would die. He might get her, but he would die. "She ain't worth it," he growled. Slowly, so slowly, raising his hands, he backed away. "She ain't worth the lead." He backed up, step by step, his eyes never leaving the axe. Bridget did not move. She was a statue of ice and rage. The leader got to his horse. He mounted. "You'll freeze, you crazy bitch!" he spat. "You'll be dead by morning, both of you." He wheeled his horse. His men followed. They vanished back into the snow, like the ghosts they were. Bridget held her stance until the sound of the horses was gone. Then the axe head wavered. It dipped. It hit the snow. Her legs gave out, and she fell to her knees, her whole body shaking in a violent, uncontrollable tremor. Jonah fell with her, his arms still around her neck. "Bridget," he breathed, his face against hers. You... "I'm all right," she panted, her voice shaking. I'm all right." "They're gone. You saved us." She nodded, her eyes closed. He was right. We're done. I can't go on. Jonah, I am so tired." She had nothing left. The will was broken. She knelt in the snow, a great, defeated mountain, and she began to cry. Not for fear, for simple, bone-deep exhaustion. Jonah held her. He, the cripple, the burden. He held her. "It's all right," he whispered, using her own words. "I've got you. I'm here. Rest." He looked up, through the swirling snow, and that's when he saw it. It was not a ghost. It was smoke, a lot of it, a thick, dark column, not a mile away. down in the draw below the pass.
Bridget,
He said, his voice urgent. He shook her.
Bridget, look, fire, a camp.
She lifted her head. She saw it. It was not a dream.
A camp?
She breathed. Hope. It was a terrible, painful thing to feel. It hurt more than the cold. Can you stand? He asked. I don't know. You have to. We're almost there. It's downhill. I can use the crutch. We can do it, together. She looked at him, at his face, grim with determination. He was not the boy she'd saved. He was a man, her man. She nodded. She got her axe, he got his crutch, and they fell and slid and limped their way down the mountain, toward the smoke. It was not a town, it was a plague pit. They stumbled out of the snow line and into a deep, muddy ravine. It was a collection of ragged tents and crude lean-tos made of pine boughs and scrapped canvas, maybe 50 people. But the air was thick with the smell of sickness, of death, and of coughing. A deep, wet, hacking cough that echoed off the rocks. A man with a face scarred by smallpox, holding a shovel, stepped out in front of them. That's far enough. Camp's quarantined. Lung fever. Please, Jonah begged, leaning on Bridget. My wife, we're freezing. My leg is broken. The man looked at Jonah's leg. He looked at Bridget's massive, exhausted form. He saw the burn on her face. He just spat. We got our own troubles. We're burying 3 today. We ain't got food. We ain't got medicine. Get on. I can help, Bridget said, her voice hoarse. The man laughed. A harsh bark. Help? Look at you, woman. You need help. I worked, she panted. Back east, in an apothecary's workshop. Grinding herbs, cleaning wounds. I know fevers. I know poultices. Let me help, and she nodded at Jonah. He's a farmer. He can help with food. The man looked at them. He saw 2 more mouths to feed, 2 more bodies to bury. But then, from one of the tents, a child started to cough, a terrible, racking sound that didn't stop. The man's face twisted in pain. He looked at Bridget. He looked at her hands. They were big. They were capable. You know herbs? I know willow bark for fever. I know comfrey for wounds. The man was quiet for a long time. We ain't got nothing. The company left us, took the doctor, took everything. We don't want anything, Jonas said, his voice firm. Just a place, a chance. Let us help. The man looked at Bridget's eyes. He saw no fear, just, He stepped aside. My name's Silas. Not that it matters. The tent, the one by the creek, that's the fever tent. Go on, then. If you're a nurse, go nurse. But I'm telling you, you go in there. You ain't coming out. Bridget looked at Jonah. He nodded. She adjusted the axe on her back. First, she said to Silas, her voice gaining a sliver of its old strength. My husband's leg. It's broken. I need a board, and hot water, and whiskey. Silas stared. Husband. He looked from Jonah to Bridget. He spat again. Well, I've seen stranger. All right, but you work for it. He pointed to a pile of scrap lumber. There's your board, and you can have what's left of the fire. But the whiskey, that's for the dying. He is dying, Bridget said. Silas looked at Jonah's leg, at the black, angry edges of the burn. He sighed. He went to his tent and came back with a half-full bottle. Don't waste it, he said, and walked away. They were in another circle of hell, but this time, they were not alone. Bridget set his leg. It was a brutal, terrible affair. She made him drink half the whiskey. She had Silas and another man hold him down. She pulled, he screamed, and then he passed out. When he woke, his leg was straight, bound between two pieces of scrap wood, and she was sitting by his head, wiping his face with a damp, cold rag. "It's done," she said. "Bridget." "Sleep. I have to work." She went into the fever tent, and she did not come out for 3 days. She was, as she had promised, a worker. She organized. She cleaned. The tent was a place of filth and despair. She took it over. She made the men haul out the soiled blankets. She made them boil water. She sent others out, with descriptions, to find the willow trees down by the creek. She brewed the bark into a bitter, dark tea, and she forced it down the throats of the sick. She was a giantess. She was a terror. She moved through the squalor, her big hands cleaning messes that made grown men vomit. She held men down when they thrashed in delirium. She sat with the dying, and she closed their eyes when they were gone. And Jonah, he did not rest. He sat by their small, given tent, his leg propped up. He could not walk, but he could work. He had his knife. He sharpened stakes. He wove pine boughs into better, tighter walls for the sick tents to keep the wind out. The camp had a small, protected patch of ground where they had tried to grow things. It was a mess. Jonah had them bring him the seed bags. He showed them how to sort the good from the bad. He taught them, from his seat in the dirt, how to turn the soil, how to space the plantings for the cold weather crops, the kale, the turnips. He was the breed with the broken leg. She was the giant nurse. He was quiet. She was loud. He was gentle. She was fierce. Slowly, day by day, the coughing began to subside. One man, then another, walked out of the fever tent, pale and shaky, but alive. They looked at Bridget, who was asleep on her feet, covered in filth, and they did not see a freak. They saw the woman who had sat with them, who had forced the bitter tea into their mouths. They looked at Jonah, sitting by his small, neat patch of green shoots, his hands in the dirt, and they did not see a half-breed. They saw the man who was, against all odds, growing food. One night, a week in, Silas came to their tent. Bridget was asleep, for the first time, on a pile of blankets. Jonah was mending a torn canvas bucket. Silas stood in the doorway. "The fever, it broke. We only buried one, since you came. We were burying 3 a day." Jonah nodded. "Bridget she's a good nurse. She's something," Silas said, his voice gruff. He held out a small, lumpy sack. From the camp. It ain't much." Jonah opened it. Inside was a piece of smoked venison, a full pound of real coffee, and a small tin of peaches. We thank you," Silas mumbled, awkward. You're folk. You're our folk." He left. Jonah looked at the food. He looked at Bridget, asleep, her mouth open, snoring like a freight train. She was covered in God knows what, and her hair was a burned mess. He had never loved her more. He had never seen anything so beautiful. He put the coffee on the small fire. They had been accepted. The fever did not leave all at once. It clung to the camp like the mountain fog, taking 2 more souls, a young man named Pete and an old woman called Maud, before it finally broke, defeated by Bridget's endless boiling water, the bitter willow bark tea, and a sanitation routine she enforced with the fury of a drill sergeant. With the thaw, the camp changed. The snow melted, revealing a hard, rocky ground, but also patches of rich soil in the hollows. The air, no longer filled with the sound of coughing, was now filled with the ring of axes and hammers. The community had survived, and they knew who to thank. Jonah's leg had begun to knit. Bridget had set it well. He would never walk right again. The burn had taken too much. The bone setting with a permanent, stiff reminder of the fire. But he was alive. He sat in the thin spring sun, his leg propped on a log, and he directed the planting. He was, as Bridget had promised, a farmer. He had a way with the earth, a gentle, knowing touch under his guidance. The small, hopeful patches of green they had planted in the cold began to thrive. The community, this collection of outcasts, men with scarred lungs, men with missing fingers, men who had simply been thrown away, repaid their debt. "You're not living in that tent," Silas said one evening. He was the camp's unofficial leader, a man whose grimness had been softened by gratitude. "A man and his wife, they need a house. And you two, you've earned a house." They chose a spot just up the draw, away from the mud of the main camp, in a small, sheltered valley that caught the morning sun. It was a place where the snows melted first, and where, in the shadow of the pines, small, stubborn purple flowers pushed their way through the mulch. The building of it was a community act. Men who had only ever known how to swing a pickaxe now swung hammers for Jonah. They felled the trees, stripped the logs. And Bridget was the architect. She was the foundation. Jonah sat on a stump, the plans drawn in charcoal on a piece of scrap lumber. And he would call out, "We need the main beam moved. Bridget, the one by the creek." And the men would watch, still, after all these weeks, in a state of quiet awe, as she would walk to the 40-foot pine log that 4 of them together had struggled to move, and she would find the balance point, brace her shoulder, and lift. She would move things they could not. She worked from sunup to sundown, her strength a living, breathing miracle. She set the foundation stones. She raised the ridgepole. She was not the giantess. She was not the freak. She was, quite simply, Bridget, and she was building her home. Jonah, unable to lift, did what he could. He sat and meticulously carved shingles. He wove ropes. He fashioned hinges from scrap leather. His hands were never idle. It was a small cabin, just one room, like the one they had lost, but it was not the same. The old cabin had been a place of shadows, of ghosts, of a life lived on the edges. This new one was built by 100 grateful hands. It was built with a view of the valley. It was built solid, to withstand the wind. It was built for 2. By the time the first summer grasses were high, they moved in. It had a real hearth, a bed frame built by Silas himself, and a small table. They were, in the eyes of the camp, husband and wife. No preacher had said the words. No paper had been signed. There was no law in this place but the law of survival and mutual respect. And it was clear to everyone, from the oldest miner to the youngest child, that these two were a single unit. They were Mr. and Mrs. Jonah. It was a name spoken with a simple, profound respect. Life settled into a rhythm. It was a hard life. This was not a gentle land, but it was their life. Jonah's leg healed into a pronounced, stiff-legged limp. He could no longer mend fences or haul grain, but he had found a new purpose. The camp had children, a small, ragged group of kids, born in the mountains, whose parents had died or drifted. They were wild, illiterate, and shy. Jonah started a school. He had one book, a tattered copy of the Bible that had belonged to Silas's wife, and a few almanacs. He sat on the porch of their new cabin, and he taught them. He taught them their letters, drawing in the dirt. He taught them numbers. He taught them, in his quiet, patient voice, that their minds were a tool, just as valuable as a pickaxe. He was gentle. He was soft-spoken, and they adored him. They would sit around his feet, a small flock, their faces rapt, as he read them stories of floods and kings. Bridget, in turn, became the camp's guardian. She did not teach nursing. She taught strength. She saw the children, small and underfed, and she saw the wildness. She knew that in this land, gentleness was not enough. You also had to be hard. She took them to the clearing by the creek. She cut stout hickory sticks for all of them, and she taught them how to use them. She taught them vogue, as she called it in her mixed-up memory of dockside brawls and sailors' drills. She taught them balance. She taught them how to stand, how to block, how to strike. She was a terrifying, wonderful teacher. She would stand, a giantess in canvas trousers, her burned hair now cut short like a man's, and she would roar with laughter as a small, 7-year-old girl successfully whacked her on the shin. She was not just teaching them to fight. She was teaching them to be fearless. She was teaching them, the small and the weak, that they did not have to run. Their life was full. They would work all day, she in the woods or with the children, he on their small, thriving farm or with his pupils. And at night, they would sit by their own fire. He would read to her. She would listen. Her head leaned against his good knee, her eyes closed. They were content. The world, the one that had burned them and beaten them, was 1,000 miles away. On the other side of a mountain range, they were safe. The summer faded into a golden red autumn. The harvest was good. The camp had smoked venison, and Jonah's vegetables, turnips and potatoes and hardy greens, were stored in a root cellar he and Bridget had dug themselves. They were ready for the winter. The first snows had just begun to dust the high peaks when the riders came. It was not the bandits. It was worse. A boy from the camp, out checking traps, came running in, breathless. "Riders! 6 of them! They ain't from here. They're fancy." The camp tensed. Fancy was worse than rough. Fancy meant law. It meant money. It meant the outside. Bridget and Jonah came out of their cabin. Silas met them in the center of the camp. The men grabbed their rifles. They were not a town. They were a pack, and they protected their own. The riders came down the draw, slow. They were, as the boy had said, fancy. They wore clean dusters, good hats. They rode strong horses, not weary mules. The man in the lead was Arthur Abernathy. Jonah's blood went to ice. Bridget's hand went to the axe that was, as always, looped on her belt. Abernathy stopped, his eyes sweeping the camp. He saw the rough-hewn cabins, the hard-faced men with rifles, the women and children peeking from the doorways. His lip curled in disgust. Then he saw them. He saw Jonah standing straighter, no longer a boy, but a man, his face weathered, his limp obvious, and he saw Bridget. She was not the cowering, mud-soaked creature he had rejected. She was not the weeping victim. She was standing tall, her hair shorn, dressed in men's clothes, her face scarred from the fire. She looked formidable. She looked terrifying. Abernathy's pale face flushed a deep, ugly red. This was the thing that had defied him. This was the ox that had chosen the breed over his charity. This was the source of his profound, festering humiliation. He had spent months and a good $200 on trackers to find this place. "Well, well," Abernathy called, his voice slick and loud, carrying in the cold air. "The monster and her pet. It seems you found a fitting home, a sty for filth." Silas stepped forward, his rifle held easy, but ready. "This is our home, mister. We don't know you, and we don't want you. State your business and ride out." Abernathy laughed. A short, barking sound. "My business? I've come for justice. I've come for her." He pointed a gloved finger at Bridget. "That thing is my runaway bride. She broke a contract. She stole from me." "She stole nothing," Jonah said, his voice quiet, but it cut through the air. "She stole my property. She stole my good name, and she's shacked up with that." Abernathy looked at Jonah. "And you're an arsonist. You burned your own cabin, tried to burn her with it. I heard a crime of passion." It was a lie, so blatant, so twisted, that it took Jonah's breath away. Abernathy was rewriting the story. He was painting himself as the victim, the man who had come to rescue his poor, wayward bride from the breed who had mistreated her.
He's a liar!
Jonah yelled, his voice cracking with rage.
He burned us out! He tried to kill us!
Abernathy just smiled. He turned to his hired guns. See, a violent degenerate. He's confessed. I'm here to take them both back. Him, for the sheriff.
Her, for me. She has a debt to pay.
His eyes moved over Bridget, a look of such profound, poisonous ownership that Jonah wanted to be sick.
This ain't Dust Valley,
Silas growled. There ain't no sheriff here, and we like these two. You best get on your horse and ride. I have 5 men, Abernathy said. You have, what, a bunch of crippled miners? I'm not asking. He pulled his pistol, a beautiful, silver-inlaid Colt, and pointed it. Not at Bridget, at Jonah. You, he sneered, you're the start of it. You're the infection. You're coming with me. No, Jonah said. He looked at Bridget. He saw the terror in her eyes. Not for herself, but for him. He saw the men of the camp, ready to fight, ready to die for them. For him. He could not let that happen. He could not bring another fire, another death, to the people who had saved them. He took a step forward, his limp heavy. All right, he said, raising his hands. It's me you want. It's always been me. Let her go.
Let these people go. I'll go with you. Jonah, no!
Bridget's voice was a roar. He turned to her, his face pale but set. It's the only way, my bride. I can't let you fight them. I won't see you burn again. How noble, Abernathy mocked. The little breed, sacrificing himself. He motioned with the gun. Walk, now. Jonah took a pained step. I said, no. Bridget moved. She was not a woman. She was a landslide. She shoved Jonah so hard he fell, sprawling in the dirt, safe behind her. She stood alone in the center of the clearing, facing the 6 men. Her hand was on her axe. You want me, Abernathy? She said, her voice a low, chilling rumble. You've come all this way for me. Well, here I am. Abernathy looked at her. He looked at his 5 men, their rifles all aimed at her. He laughed. You? Against 6 guns? You really are as stupid as you are big. I'm not against 6 guns, Bridget said, her eyes locked on his. I'm against you. This is between you and me. You call me your property. You say I owe you a debt. Come and collect it. Man to... Thing. Come on. Or are you just a coward who needs 5 paid men to do his talking? The challenge hung in the air. The miners were silent. Jonah, on the ground, was breathless. Abernathy's men looked at him. He was their paymaster, and he had just been called a coward. His face went purple.
You bitch,
he hissed. You want a duel? You'll get one. He swung down from his horse. He drew his pistol. I'll put you down like the mad dog you are. No guns, Bridget said. Guns are for cowards. You and me, whatever you have in your hand, and whatever I have in mine. She pulled the axe from her belt. She held it down, the head resting in the dirt. Abernathy looked at his gun. He looked at her axe. She was a good 30 feet away. He was a fair shot. He would kill her before she took 2 steps. Fine, he sneered. Your funeral. He raised his Colt, leveling it at her chest. This is for shaming me, you giant whore. He fired. The sound was deafening, echoing off the mountains. Bridget was not there. The moment he tensed, the moment his finger had squeezed, she had moved. She had not run at him. She had lunged, sideways, a movement so impossibly fast for her size that it defied physics. The bullet tore through the air where she had been. He stared, confused. He fired again, wildly. She was moving, zigzagging, her head down, closing the distance. She was not a woman. She was a boulder, rolling downhill.
Shoot her,
he screamed at his men. But it was too late. His men were on horseback, their rifles unsteady. They were too close to each other. They were afraid of hitting him. He tried to fire a third time, fumbling, panicking. She was on him. She did not swing the axe. She did not raise it. She ran through him. She hit him. Shoulder first, a solid 200-pound impact of muscle and bone. Abernathy made a sound like a wet bag being dropped. The air flew from his lungs. His pistol went flying, landing in the mud. He crumpled. Bridget stood over him. The axe raised now, its shadow falling across his face. He was on his back, gasping, trying to crawl away. He was broken. The 5 hired guns sat on their horses, their rifles half raised. They looked at their boss, wheezing in the dirt. They looked at the giant woman, her face a mask of cold, hard rage, the axe in her hand. They looked at the ring of miners, all with their rifles aimed, steady. This was not a good payday. This was not what they'd signed up for. The leader of the gunmen slowly, very slowly, lowered his rifle. We're just paid companions, ma'am. We ain't got no quarrel here. Bridget did not look at them. She kept her eyes, and her axe, on Abernathy. "Get him," she said, her voice like gravel, "and get out." The gunmen scrambled. 2 of them dismounted, grabbed the gasping, whimpering Abernathy, and hauled him onto his horse like a sack of feed. You'll hang for this," Abernathy choked out, clutching his ribs. "There are no ropes here," Bridget said. "Only us. If you ever come back, I won't use my shoulder. I'll use this." She tapped the sharp edge of the axe against his boot. He whimpered. The men rode out. They did not look back. They kicked their horses into a gallop and disappeared up the draw, leaving a cloud of dust and a profound, stunned silence. The camp stood frozen. Bridget stood for a long time, her back to them, watching the riders go. Finally, her shoulders slumped. The axe, so heavy, dropped to her side. Jonah pushed himself up, his legs screaming in protest. He limped to her, his heart so full it felt like it would burst from his chest. He stood behind her. He did not know what to say. He turned to the community. They were all watching. Silas, the children, the women. He, Jonah, the ghost of Dust Valley, the quiet man, the breed, found his voice. It did not shake. It rang out, clear and strong, in the cold mountain air. "This," he said, and he put his hand on Bridget's back. She flinched, then leaned into his touch. "This is my wife. This is Bridget." He looked at all of them, his gray eyes burning. "She is the woman who pulled me from a fire. She is the woman who carried me over a mountain. She is the woman who faced down fever. And she is the woman who just saved this entire camp. She saved me from the entire world." His voice grew thick. I have heard the whispers. I know what the world calls her. What they called her. Back there. I know the names. Giant, freak, ox." He looked at the children. His pupils. "You will never, ever use those words. Not in this place. She is not a freak. She is strong. She is not a giant. She is my bride. And no one will ever call her by a dirty name again. Not while I live." He had never spoken so many words. He was shaking when he finished. Silas stepped forward. He took his hat off. She ain't no giant. Son, she's our guardian. She's Mrs. Jonah. And we're proud to have her." One by one, the miners, the women, they nodded. The children ran forward, and the same small 7-year-old girl, who always hit Bridget's shins, ran up and hugged Bridget around the leg. Bridget stood, frozen, the axe in her hand, and she began to cry, not in rage, not in sadness, but in quiet, shuddering relief. Jonah put his arms around her, and he held her. And the whole camp, they just watched. They let them be. That night, the cabin was warm. The wind was high outside, howling over the peaks. But inside, the fire was bright. A real storm was coming. Bridget was sitting on the hearth, staring into the flames. She was quiet. She had washed her face. She was in her nightgown. Jonah was sitting at the table. He had been working on something, hunched over, his hands busy. You didn't have to say that, Jonah, she said, her voice small. To them. Yes, I did, he said, not looking up from his work. It was the truest thing I've ever said. They would have shot you. You were going to go with him. I couldn't let him hurt you. And I, she said, her voice fierce, could not let him take you. He was quiet. He finished what he was doing. He stood, his limp heavy in the small room, and walked to her. He knelt in front of her. It was painful, with his stiff leg, but he did it. He was on his knees. You called me your bridegroom, he said, in the cave. She nodded, a small blush on her scarred cheeks. I did? A bride. A bride needs a ring. Jonah, we don't need things. We have this. She motioned to the cabin, the fire. I know. He opened his hand. In his palm was a small, dull, brass ring. She looked at it. It was rough. It was a bullet casing. He had taken the shell from Abernathy's missed shot, the one from the mud. He had spent the last 2 hours filing it, cutting it, smoothing the edges until it was a perfect, simple, round band. It was not silver. It was not gold. It was brass. It was the metal of a weapon. She looked at it, then at his face. His gray eyes were so serious, so full of love. She burst out laughing. It was not a giggle. It was a full, from-the-gut roar of a laugh. It was a laugh of pure, unadulterated joy. And then the laugh broke, and a tear ran down her cheek. And then another. She was laughing and weeping at the same time, a beautiful, glorious, human mess. It's perfect, she choked out. It was all I had, he said, his own voice thick. It's perfect. She held out her hand, her large, scarred, powerful hand. He took it. He slid the simple brass ring onto her fourth finger. It fit. She looked at it, gleaming in the firelight. My bride, he said. She pulled him up, his bad leg and all, and kissed him. She kissed him with the strength of the mountain and the warmth of the fire. Outside, the wind howled, and against the small window, the first flakes of the big winter snow began to fall, silent and soft. He held her face in his hands, his thumbs tracing her cheekbones. You taught me how to live. Bridget, he whispered. You taught me how to fight. You taught me what it is to be a man. She looked at him, her eyes shining. Now, he said, his voice a low, steady vow. Let me love you for a lifetime. Thank you for listening to this story. We'd love to hear from you. Where in the world are you listening from? Let us know in the comments below so we can connect. Please subscribe to From Wild West and share your thoughts.